10 beds, $200,000 a month per client, a 35% repeat rate. Somewhere right now, an $85 million fund is chasing 20% returns, not on tech, not on real estate, on addiction. The economics of luxury rehab have nothing to do with recovery. They're built on a financial instrument the industry quietly calls the rolling retainer. Here's how the money actually works. A luxury rehab center markets itself with words like privacy, healing, and transformation. Strip away the brochure, and what remains is a recurring invoice engineered for reliability, not recovery. The industry's favorite term is the rolling retainer. It's a subscription, not a cure. Here is how the math works for a hypothetical 10-bed facility. Start with 10 beds, each reserved for a single client at a modeled $200,000 per month. That is $2 million in gross billings every 30 days. The contract is designed to auto-renew. Unless the client's family delivers a formal notice, the retainer rolls forward and the center charges another $200,000 for the next month. There is no defined endpoint, just a recurring debit, month after month, until the family intervenes. Ancillary services layer on top: private psychiatry, bespoke therapies, security surcharges. Assume a 20% markup for these extras. That adds $40,000 per client, or $400,000 across all beds, bringing total modeled monthly revenue to $2.4 million. Placement fees and one-time onboarding charges, often six figures, are not even included in this baseline. Occupancy is managed for maximum predictability. Facilities target 90% annual fill rates, but the rolling retainer smooths out vacancies. If a client leaves, a new admission, often routed through a family office advisor or patient broker, fills the gap within days. The result is a near-continuous cash flow, engineered to withstand the unpredictability of real recovery outcomes. With a 35% repeat admission rate, the same families cycle through the system, sometimes for years. The invoice does not depend on clinical progress or medical necessity. It depends on the ability to pay and the willingness to keep the problem contained. For investors, this is the appeal. A luxury rehab center becomes a financial product, as stable and predictable as a commercial lease. The rolling retainer is the engine that keeps the money moving, regardless of what happens to the people inside. A published daily rate of $3,900 at Summit Malibu translates to $117,000 per month. That is nearly 6 times the top end of standard inpatient rehab. But that is only the starting figure. The posted menu of extras includes private psychiatry, neurofeedback, and 24-hour security, each billed as an additional line item. 3 of the most common ancillaries, concierge clinical sessions, bespoke therapies, and security surcharges, can add 20% or more to the base fee, pushing the true cost of a stay well beyond the headline rate. Placement fees, often 6 figures, are quietly paid to patient brokers or family office intermediaries for a single successful admission. In one documented case, a $100,000 placement commission was paid for a single referral. That sum never appears on the client's invoice, but it is baked into the overall acquisition cost. For investors, these numbers are not hypothetical. In 2023, a private fund announced an $85 million capital raise, explicitly targeting luxury rehab assets and projecting a 20% internal rate of return. The fund's prospectus describes the business as a boutique real estate model, with occupancy-driven cash flow and a suite of high-margin ancillary services. The logic is simple. Treat each bed as a revenue stream secured by long-term contracts, not as a clinical obligation. The more layers of billable services, the higher the yield per client, and the more attractive the property becomes as a financial asset. A forensic accountant reviewing these structures points out that the cash flow resembles a hedge fund more than a hospital. Revenue is diversified across base retainers, ancillary markups, and recurring placement fees. The facility's value is measured not by recovery outcomes, but by the predictability and duration of high-ticket billing cycles. In this model, addiction and family crisis are less a medical emergency than a recurring premium, one that can be packaged, securitized, and sold to the next round of capital. The luxury rehab center, stripped of its spa veneer, is engineered for yield and investor confidence. The product is not sobriety, the product is cash flow. A luxury rehab center functions less like a hospital and more like a fortress, with every entry and interaction engineered to protect revenue and reputation. The perimeter is walled and gated, monitored by security staff who blend the posture of private bodyguards with the vigilance of surveillance contractors. Every visitor, including family members and private clinicians, faces a checkpoint where credentials are verified and cell phones are surrendered. Inside, a blend of hospitality and clinical staff work in tandem, each with a defined role in the containment process. The chef and the psychiatrist might cross paths in a hallway, but both answer to a strict chain of command that prioritizes discretion above all. Admissions begins with a legal document, not a warm welcome. The intake process requires a signed non-disclosure agreement before any conversation about treatment or even a tour of the grounds. The NDA is explicit. No mention of other clients, no discussion of internal routines, and no public statements without prior approval. Failure to comply triggers automatic termination of services and, in some cases, legal action. One former admissions director, whose voice is altered here to protect their identity, describes the workflow as military-grade secrecy wrapped in hospitality language. Every client is a high-value asset, and the first priority is to minimize reputational risk, both theirs and the facilities. Encrypted communication systems are standard. Staff coordinate via secure messaging apps, and client names are replaced with coded identifiers on internal rosters. Medical records are stored in isolated servers, accessible only to a handful of authorized personnel. The facility layout itself is designed to prevent unwanted encounters, staggered meal times, private therapy suites, and isolation zones for clients considered at risk of leaving or attracting attention. The entire environment is optimized for billing continuity. Each workflow, security checks, NDA enforcement, encrypted messaging, serves a dual purpose: to shield the client from public scrutiny and to lock in the recurring revenue stream. The more tightly controlled the environment, the easier it is to justify premium surcharges and to enforce the terms of the rolling retainer. For investors, these operational controls are not just about privacy, they are the mechanisms that transform a crisis into a reliable cash flow. Client A arrived at the gates of a luxury rehab facility under pressure, not choice. The contract was already signed by their family office, and the message was blunt: if you want to keep your inheritance, you'll complete the program. Inside, the experience was less about therapy and more about containment. Private security shadowed every move. Meals were staggered to prevent accidental meetings with other clients. Even the psychiatrist's sessions were scheduled through encrypted apps, with notes locked away on isolated servers. Client A described the process as living in a gilded cage, with the locks paid for by my own trust fund. An addiction psychiatrist, reviewing anonymized records, points out a pattern. These centers design their protocols for risk aversion, not clinical progress. The goal is to avoid scandal, not necessarily to foster recovery. Investigative reporting echoes this assessment. A 2017 expose by STET found that some luxury facilities provided shoddy care and basic counseling, despite charging more than $100,000 a month. One lawsuit alleged that medical warnings were ignored, resulting in permanent brain damage for a client who was left unattended during a crisis. The legal risks are not theoretical. In Kentucky, Addiction Recovery Care billed Medicaid $1.7 billion for fabricated group sessions, settling for $377 million while denying wrongdoing. In California, a wrongful death suit against a Malibu facility details how staff failed to respond to a medical emergency, leaving a client with irreversible injuries. These cases rarely reach trial, but the settlements run into 9 figures and force facilities to quietly update their procedures on paper, if not in practice. The illusion of privacy and care is maintained by a wall of legal agreements and non-disclosure clauses. Yet every layer of secrecy, every extra fee for discretion adds to the facility's revenue stream while pushing human risk further out of sight. The business model rewards containment, not cure. In the words of one former client, "You're not there to get better, you're there to disappear for a price." Today, addiction becomes a recurring revenue stream, engineered, not healed, behind locked gates and airtight contracts. For every promise of privacy, there is a price indexed to fear and reputation. In this market, crisis is capital. The real recovery is measured in margins, not in lives changed. Share your thoughts below.